very, very quickly. So we'll go into the details of the materials. There you saw in the video earlier about the Bruxer restoration. The Bruxer now that you see here, this is a high strength formulation of the zirconia. So this is equivalent to what we call Bruxer full strength through the lab. It's a 3 mol yttria zirconia. So that is your highest strength zirconia coming in at 1200 or more megapascal of flexural strength. This is indicated for posterior full coverage restorations. You can use this on premolars, molars, and also implant restorations. As far as delivery of it, whatever you're currently using for cementation, the most commonly used now is a resin modified glass ionomer, or you can adhesively cement these restorations in. The mill time for this restoration takes about 30 to 45 minutes, and it's dependent on the size of the restoration, the depth of the preparation, but within an hour, less than 50 minutes, you can have a final restoration ready to cement. And this is really what sets this system apart from anything else out there, is the fact that you can mill a fully sintered zirconia crown. And so again, what that means is these blocks have already achieved or been through that sintering cycle, that oven cycle that you saw the lab do with those milled restorations. And so out of the mill, you're ready to seat this for your patient.
Justin, I wanted to interrupt you for a second because,
Sure.
as someone who just recently got into milling, and I consider myself a newbie, I didn't know any of these states. So when you say fully sintered, zirconia comes in a soft state, and that's why other systems can mill this in 10 minutes or less. But then they have to put that soft state into an oven and for 20 minutes or so to harden it up and crystallize it, correct?
That is correct. That is correct. So the chair-side systems or in-office mills that do mill zirconia, all other systems require the oven cycle to sinter and cure the material. So it does mill a little bit larger, like you saw the lab do, and it does require that oven step. And it
Yeah.
may not seem like a big deal, but yeah, in the middle of a busy practice, you're going to have to stop whatever you're doing or have someone else dedicated to getting the restoration out of the mill, polish it, and then throw it in an oven. So as a lab, we know that dentists and your staff, I'm sure, don't want to be technicians. And so this system from the ground up was designed to make it as simple as possible to deliver that high strength zirconia material.
And that's exactly what I was going to get at. There's no good or bad. I mean, they're all good things. Of bringing same day dentistry into every practice is a good thing. It's just that this one works for me well because if I choose to put glaze on this, I can buy a oven and put the glaze on it. But if I don't really want to do that, I put it into the mill, and 30 to 40 minutes later, it's ready to be cemented, rather than you get the same amount of time, basically 10 minutes plus another 20 to 30 minutes for the soft state. Now someone has to be responsible for changing that, putting the glaze on, doing all that stuff. So go ahead.
That's right.
Just wanted to
That
mention that I'm not, every system has its pros and cons. I'm comfortable with this system.
Most definitely. Well, I'm glad. I'm glad it's working out for you, and you can speak as a through your own personal experience of it being more simple, again, from the mill to the patient. And I think that confuses a lot of people. It's because I think those that understand zirconia or know what the lab does knows about that oven cycle. And oftentimes we've had dentists and researchers from all over the world stop by at the show floor at certain conventions and say, there's no way that this is fully sintered. And sure enough, with this is the block itself has already received that several hours of sintering time to reach that final hardened state of zirconia. So it really is amazing the fact that the mill can mill this out into a perfect fitting restoration.
Right.
So as you did mention, if you wanted to glaze, and this is a question we do receive pretty often, is can I glaze this if I wanted to? You absolutely can. But as far as finishing, the majority, 95+% of the users with this system are doing exactly what you're doing, Bob, and that is to take it out the mill, maybe with a light polish, and you're ready to go. So as far as making adjustments to these restorations, it's the same as you would with a lab-made zirconia or Bruxer crown. I recommend using a fine grit diamond to make adjustments to it. And from that point, you can polish. There is a polishing kit dedicated to Bruxer, or if there's a porcelain or zirconia polishing kit that works better or that you prefer, then you can absolutely use that on this material too. So I'll take you through what this process looks like. So this patient came in with, it was a resin restoration on number 30 that actually popped off. So what we did was we cleaned up the preparation. I dropped the margins a little more equigingival, and soft tissue management is very, very important. No different whether you're taking conventional impression or a digital impression, soft tissue management, exposing those margins are extremely important. And I know, Bob, you've hit on this several times about that double core technique even. So exposing those margins, super, super critical. So once you take your digital scan, so you're going to scan the prep quadrant, the adjacent teeth, the opposing, and getting that bite, which I'll show you in the software here. And now, so this is the design software. So this is that case number 30. Once you open the case up, the very first step of every design is to set your margin or mark your margin. And the margin, as we know, is the most critical component of every restoration. That's how it's going to adapt to the unprepped areas of the tooth. And so I'm using my mouse here. So you're going to use the mouse to help you zoom in and rotate, and you can shift the model around the screen. I'll try not to move too quickly to reduce any or prevent any motion sickness out there. Now, one of the really nice things about the software is the software developers, this software was developed by Glidewell software developers. It's modeled after the same software that's used within the lab, but they've added even more features to make it simple for in-office use. And so for this first stage of marking the margin, there's a process called Margin AI or function called Margin AI, where it will identify where the preparation is. And if you have a nice sharp finish line and good tissue retraction, it does pre-place the margin for you. And this is exactly what it looked like when I opened the case. And just to show you that I'm not messing around here, on the left-hand side, I'm going to hit the reset margin button. It's going to clear the margin. So you can see there's a way to manually mark the margin too. But I'm going to show you in this window, I'm going to hit Margin AI, and the software is going to process what the preparation is and place the margin where it sees that sharp finish line. So you can see that red line just drop right into place. And it's not always 100% perfect. So I can see on this distal buccal area, all we have to do is just shift that around. So as far as making changes or editing the margin, when you hover your mouse pointer over the line, you can left click and just drag that into position. And so now you're going to see your preparations in a whole different way if you haven't done any CAD/CAM or chairside milling before. Now you're going to pay a lot closer attention to how you're preparing the tooth and retracting that tissue. And so what I normally do is just work my way around. I can follow the margin here. We're going to look at the lingual. We're going to check the mesial side. If there's any other areas that are or areas that need an edit, you can shift it like I just showed you, or I'm going to make a little move here. A second way to edit the margin is to double click on the line, and then you can redraw a segment. And once you connect back to the line, it resets it for you. So that's a great way, additional way that you can edit the line as needed. But the better your prep is, the better your tissue retraction, tissue management, the more efficient you can be through this step. So once the margin's set,
Justin,
you can see. Sure.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to show
No
you a
problem.
couple of cool things that I use for my margins. And as you said, when your margins are defined and you can separate the gums, it's pretty easy. The AI does that. But sometimes you need a little help. I wanted you to show, maybe you can click that show only preparation only box.
Yeah, you got
That's a really cool thing that takes everything, takes everything away so you can zoom in areas and see it better. And then your lab, the support for Glidewell IO is so great. I actually take the arrows off as well, the occlusal umbilical. So now I just have the prep almost like a die, that you can look at. And then if you can put the curvature on.
Oh yeah.
These are the tricks that some of the support guys have taught me, that it basically, there is a little white area that you can, if you have any questions, that's usually where the margin is, right in between the, right. Yep, exactly. So you can set the margin based on that, the little area, the white area that there is.
Most definitely. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. There's several additional visual aids, such as the show only prep, making a die. The curvature function, what that does is it highlights edges on the tooth. And you can even turn this or turn the color off. So I like to actually use the color or the stone model that with the curvature function. I find it provides an even nicer contrast on the finish line. So you can use that to maybe better visualize and better position your margin. So that's really neat.
Yeah, and even if you turn the curvature off in this state, and if you rotate it, like look at it from the bottom, you can actually see. No, 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 not the other. I'm sorry. Yeah, this is good too. But like if you get close to it and look at the margin from sideways, you can actually see where the prep is, and
Oh
maybe
yeah,
like in the mesial buccal, maybe a little bit short. So you can adjust it really well.
most definitely.
You know.
Yes. You can spend a lot of time evaluating your margin uh, as needed. And there's several different ways. I turned it, you said upside down or turn it around. I thought because there's actually some users that kind of enjoy or prefer looking at it like an impression. So you can edit the margin also from that view too.
Yes. Yeah, it becomes fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of different ways that you can go about using the software. Yeah, there's a lot of different tools, and I really just want to show you the workflow, a
Right.
simple process, but I'm glad you're showing some of those tools that you learned about to aid with your marking of the margin, because as we know, it's so important. We really want to get that dialed in as best as we can.
Right.
All right. Well, thanks for that. So I'm going to turn off the show only, and we can go and turn the color back on. So it's really up to you if you prefer marking it in color, which is great. If you want to see that contrast between hard and soft tissue, you can toggle the margin on and off on the lower right-hand side here. If I also like to use that in areas that may be a little bit more questionable. And of course, you saw the curvature both in color and stone to help aid with the placement of the margin. Now, those arrows that we spoke about a minute ago, I'm going to turn off curvature. The occlusal and buccal directional arrows, you can see once the margin is marked, the software puts these arrows on, and this is essentially identifying to the system what is north, south, east, and west, what's buccal, occlusal, and this will help feed that information into the design algorithms to create a really accurate design proposal. And so right now, what I normally do is just look straight down on the occlusal plane, and then from there, you can double click on the blue arrow, and it just points straight to the occlusal. And that way, for the prep and for this design, it's going to match the occlusal of the adjacent teeth. And so once the margin's set and you mark the or set the occlusal and buccal arrow down on the bottom of the screen, I'm going to hit design, and the software is going to now, from that margin position, analyze the adjacent teeth. It analyzes the opposing dentition to create a proposal, a design proposal that should require very little adjustment, and it's going to match this clinical situation as best as we can. So you can see here's the proposal. And just to give you an idea or layout of the software here, on the left-hand side, we have this column of tools. These tools allow you to make adjustments to the design itself. On the right-hand side of the screen, we have our visual options, visual aids. So you already saw some of those for the model. And if we navigate a little lower, you can see maxillary, mandible. So this is how we activate and bring about our opposing model. And we can look at it both from the lingual and buccal. So you have several different views, several different ways that you can analyze your design. But we can see this is a really nice functional design. You can see how the buccal is fitting right into the central fossa of the opposing, exactly what we want. We can view it from the lingual as needed. You can see where exactly those contact areas are on your design. So you can see a little bit there on that marginal ridge. And so you can dial this in really however you want. I know there's a lot of different philosophies on occlusion. You can make adjustments in whatever area that you want to your heart's content. But I'm going to keep things a little simple here and really just show you what's needed in order to send this off to the mill. And that would be to set your contact parameters. So there's basically 3 zones of contact. You have a contact on the mesial, contact on the distal, and contact with the occlusal or the opposing area for your occlusion. And so you can see that with the values on the design itself. So notice how there's a 0 on the distal, 0 on the mesial, and a negative 350 on the occlusal. So these are our 3 zones of contact. So I'm just going to spin around here. I'm just more used to having the buckle facing down. And so I'm going to just bring the design a little bit over to the left-hand side here next to this window. So you'll see that there's this window that's on automatically. This is our contacts window. And you'll see there's 3 areas of numbers on this window. And so this is where you can set how heavy or how light you want your contacts to be. We, of course, provide recommended values. And these are my recommended values for Bruxer restorations. So I like to have it on 0 and 0 and minus 350 on the occlusal. Now, you might be wondering, why is it a minus 350 on the occlusal? Would that be too open? No, we're actually compensating for the machining of this restoration and also taking into account the dynamic movement and compression of the teeth. This is just after several restorations and in testing that we've identified these values allow for minimal, if not no, adjustments once the restoration is milled out. And that is what I know most of you, I'm sure, are hoping for with your restorations, whether it's from the lab or, of course, chairside. Now, one of the neat things, and you can see we preset these values. So there's an area in the settings where you can set what you want those values and contact parameters to be, so that every time you enter a design, those numbers are going to be set. So we technically don't have to do anything. But I'm going to show you a little something extra that we do have here. We all may have a different desired broadness to the contact, and the software here has a great function, a great tool to establish that. So on the bottom of the contacts window, you'll see that there's a button here for mesial, edit mesial spot, edit distal spot. So I'm going to go to edit mesial first. What these tools allow you to do is you can see when I click edit mesial, it brings us to a straight on view of the mesial neighbor, number 29. And so this tool, what it does is it allows you to now draw how large and where on the adjacent tooth you want the contact area to be. So you can draw your contact area. You can see, we can visualize where on that tooth surface it should be located. And then once you draw that area, I'm just using my mouse, left clicking and holding and drawing an oval. Once I'm happy with the drawing, I can hit the check mark to accept it. And then now we'll go to the distal and I'm going to X out of it for a second. Look how the distal contact may be a little bit more open. So let's make it a broader contact. So I'm going to go to edit distal spot, and I always like to visualize that mesial surface or that contact surface. That way I'm not drawing it too large or too small. And so let's say we want the contact to be a little bit broader from buccal to lingual, and we can see a nice larger surface area. And now I'll accept it. So nothing happens yet. We have that same contact. So nothing happens until we hit this button called Fix Contacts. So once I hit Fix Contacts, take a look at that contact area on the distal. Notice how the software is going to, what it does is it just expands that design surface to adapt to the area that I just drew. And it's going to set the value and the heaviness of that contact to whatever number that we have set within these boxes. And so we can see a nice broader contact on the mesial as well. So this window here, this contacts window, has all kinds of great automated functions to simplify the design. And so that's really all there is to getting the restoration milled out or completed, getting the design completed to send to the mill. So once you're ready, you just hit send to mill on the bottom, and then the software is going to directly send this design file to the milling unit. And again, the block will take about 30 to 40 minutes to mill out. And each block does come with a single-use diamond burr, and each one's about $35.
Yeah, I wanted to, before you move away from this slide, I wanted to let people also know that, there are other functions on this software that you can, like, let's say someone may feel like, oh, this crown is a little bit boxy, I want to round this corner off. There are a lot of little icons on the left-hand side that it's really easy to learn. and it's not that difficult. You'll get it, like a smoothness, moving, adding. Like I talk about those last teeth in the mouth that may move distally. You can adjust the contacts yourself. Within a month, you'll learn all of those. And then on the right hand side, I see that you have a pre-treatment crown as well,
Yep,
right?
that's right. I do have a pre-treatment. So what that pre-treatment is a scan of the preoperative tooth.
Yeah,
And
and
so at all times, go on, Bob.
I was going to say that I've in the last few months I've started to do the pre scan with the method every time, because you can actually use the old crown's dimensions to try to get close to what it was, not necessarily exact, but so the patient doesn't say, "Oh yeah, it feels a little different." So it's a good tool.
Absolutely. So the pre-treatment, you can see it scanned in. Anytime you do scan in the preoperative tooth, or even a wax up, you can use that for the design. So you can match a new design to get it close. Like this tooth has pretty worn anatomy, and maybe you want new anatomy, but kind of fit within the dimensions of that previous tooth. You absolutely can do that. Or if you're happy with what was there, just copy it and you can easily mill out that same contour and shape. Where this is really useful would be for survey crowns, crowns fitting under an existing partial. You're replacing a crown that fit to an existing partial, and that way you can establish all of those critical areas on that crown, the rest seat, the guide planes, undercuts, buccal or lingual. So that way it makes that much easier to make a crown to that situation. Or if the patient has an existing removable appliance or aligners, that way you can have those appliances fit that situation, fit it much, much better. I use this function for my aesthetic cases. So I do all kind of aesthetic makeovers with the system. And so if I have a wax up, I can establish the midline, contours, proportions as needed for the case.
Yeah, and I also want to mention here is that if it sounds a little overwhelming, there is no worry. I see that you actually zeroed out the support phone numbers on top of your software, but the support number is up there. And if you get stuck, I still to this day do it. If I get stuck, I call the support and they help me design it. They help me adjust it. They're very, very helpful. And to be honest, I think the support division of the milling department is the crown jewel of this whole system. They're very good. They're very nice, and I truly appreciate what they do.
Most definitely. The support team is incredible in helping users, dentists, and their staff get through cases. In fact, we encourage you to give them a call. They are available to assist with margin marking, really troubleshooting anything, evaluating your design, helping you through more challenging cases. And they are ultimately there to ensure you're successful and never alone whenever you're working on the system. And it's funny you pointed out the support number. I never really looked up there on my software. I'm using a test version of the software, so the ones that you all would receive does have the actual number up there. I need to talk to them about this. Maybe I need to give them a call sometimes. But on the mouse pad too, you will have the support number listed on the bottom. So there's several different areas or places where you won't lose sight of how to get in touch with someone to help you out.
Great.
I'm glad you pointed out, yeah, there's a lot of different tools. So sometimes the aesthetics, or most times aesthetics, are very subjective, and you may look at this crown and may want to change a cusp position, contour, embrasure position, marginal ridge, height, or position. And so just to show you some of those tools that Bob was alluding to on this left-hand side, we have this section called Sculpt. And you can see when I click Sculpt, so I basically went away from this contacts window, went to Sculpt, and you'll see there's a row of tools here, and on by default is one of my favorite tools called Freeform. And what Freeform allows you to do is really take control of literally any part of this design. And so you'll see there's a bubble when I hover over the design, and I now have full control over it. So I can left click and hold and move that around. And you can also change the size of what you're controlling. So you can control a larger portion, or you can see when I make it smaller, less of the design. And so the software does give you immediate feedback on how any changes are affecting the contact areas. And also, if you go really low, you can also see a thin area begin to form. So it does have some warnings within the design to notify you of any critical changes that can affect the outcome of your case.
And also there is a back button on the upper left corner. So just in case you mess up, you can press the back button and it goes back.
Another really good one. So let's say you start, you get a little out of control and, you're playing around and what happens a lot is as you're learning the mouse movements, you might accidentally pull something way off. As Bob said, you have the undo, which all great softwares have to just get you right back to a safe spot.
Right.
What other favorite tools do you have, Bob, besides
the only thing I wanted to mention is that if you don't like what the AI gives you, and sometimes the AI has a hard time suggesting something, there is a great library as well that you then become, I suggest that to people to, once they get used to the software, then they can actually create a quote unquote perfect looking crown with the way they want it by using a library tooth in that area. Everyone has their favorites, but I like the smooth button for me is, I can even reduce with it a little bit, if I wanted to, rather
Absolutely.
than using the move button. But yeah, it's a great software. It's staying in the office after hours playing with it definitely will enhance your experience later on.
You can see I'm using that smooth function to just even soften the anatomy and wipe that away. And let's say you smoothed a little too much. Now your contacts are a little light. Now you can just hit fix contacts to just bring that back into a better position. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. It's almost like Photoshop, dental Photoshop. You can make all kind of adjustments. We would really spend all day diving into everything that the software has available to you. But ultimately, I just wanted to show you getting the contacts dialed in, marking margins, of course, and getting your contacts set. That's really what's key to be able to send this off to the mill and have this fabricated.
Right. And if you have your contacts, not contacts, your margins defined, your assistant can literally mark this after a week of looking at it. My assistant is now she literally fights me over, I want to do it because it's a fun thing in the middle of the night.
Absolutely. And that's what we often hear from a lot of users. Once you kind of learn the system, get over that initial learning curve, it does make dentistry and make the treatments that we do, the bread and butter stuff, at least the bread and butter indirect restorations, a lot more enjoyable. And that's what it should be about. It's definitely very rewarding.
Great.
All right. Yeah, I'll go into another case after I'm going to switch back over here. Okay, so this was the number 30. There was the prep, and that was the design. So again, this is Bruxer now, the 3Y high strength zirconia, and with just a light polish on the restoration. And I normally use a resin modified glass ionomer, such as 3M's Reliax Luting Plus, but whatever cement that you like using, you can use an adhesive resin, self-adhesive resin. It's really your personal preference. And we do have guidelines on bonding these restorations as well. And by the way, Bob, I didn't see what time we started. So just
we still have a half an hour.
Okay. All right. Just
Right.
feel free to holler if you need me to
Sure.
wrap up. So this next case, this is another one I want to take you through. This is number 19. So lower left first molar. You can see there's a big patch of some restorative material there. Let's take a look from the buccal. You can see a class 5 composite along the cervical area. And we're going to prep this down. And so I think with that class 5 composite, there was a bit of bone loss. So I barreled out the furcation and created my finish line along that furcal area. And we get this scanned in. So I'm going to dive back into the design software here. So I'm going to open this next case. And let's see what this design process is. So Bob, if you come up with more interesting tools that you love using, feel free to holler and we can talk about it. So once this case is open, you can see our preparation. And once again, the AI, the margin AI does take effect, but there's some areas, this is a little bit of a different type of preparation than the systems have been written for. So you can see along this furcation, it didn't mark through the furcation. So all I have to do is I'll double click on the good area, the margin, and just kind of like connecting the dots. I'm going to give some clicks along here and just draw a new segment. As you saw earlier, we had that curvature function. You can use that to aid yourself or turn it to stone, which I like to do. And Bob likes to show only preparation, which is always nice. Isolates the prep on its own, gives you more visibility in those interproximal areas. And I just follow around the margin or follow around the preparation and see what areas may need to be modified. So I'm going to go to the lingual side here and center on the lingual. I can see that it's really fallen over the edge. So I can just shift that margin a bit upwards. And
while you're doing this,
side. Yep.
while you're doing this, I wanted to stress that we actually use in this step, we use all the options. I use curvature, I use preparation only, but when you take the preparation only box off, you actually can, when you see the whole prep, it shows you the tissue a little bit even better. So now you can readjust. So we use all of them at the same time and make sure they check out in every little step that there is. It helps to use them all at the same time and then one at a time.
Absolutely. There's a lot of different tools, as was mentioned. So you fire all of them on, huh? Show only prep, you turn on the curvature.
Exactly.
And
because each one shows you, like if I'm having an issue with one area of my margin, I'll check them in every little color and I'll definitely get it perfected in one of them.
Most definitely. And you do, of course, get more efficient as you do more and more cases. Right. We find usually 5 to 10. Many users get much more comfortable with this process. But hopefully I'm showing it fairly easily here. You can see it's really just a matter of the software does pre-place most of it for you, and you have these couple of functions to make edits to it, just clicking and dragging, or as you saw earlier, you can double click and draw a new line. Or like in the design process, if you make some accidental changes or changes that you wanted to reverse, you can undo very, very easily. So once again, once the margin's set, I'll turn off curvature now, and you can set the occlusal, the buckle arrow is usually right on, and now we're going to hit the design button right on the bottom. And so once again, you're seeing in real time the software assess, analyze the adjacent teeth, analyze the opposing, and give us a nice starting point for our initial design proposal. And so on the right-hand side, again, if you want to check how the opposing teeth interact with your design, you can easily hit the maxillary or mandibular, whichever side is the opposing, and you can check it from both the buccal and lingual. And you can see the AI does a really nice job of making this starting point for our design. And once again, how do you know that you're ready to send this off to the mill? It's really just making sure that those those contact values are what works for you. And this is what works for me. The 0 and 0 on the mesial and distal and minus 350 on the occlusal. And this time the software did create a nice broader contact on both the mesial and distal. But of course, if you want to make even further changes, you absolutely can using one of those tools. And so once again, just to show you the free form, let's say you wanted to maybe change the contour. That's the freeform tool, expanding or contracting the surface as you'd like. Anything else you want to change here, Bob?
No, that looks pretty good.
So not a bad design, just all from the software. But as you see, if you wanted to change it, you can. If you're happy with what the software provides for you, just verify that those contact values are what you want, and then just hit send to mill, and you're ready to go. All right, let's take a look at what this final restoration looks like. And that's where the prep was. You can see the milled restoration. The mill follows that vertical area. And we seat this down. So this was this final photo was taken about 2 weeks after the delivery, and you can see how the soft tissue filled in that furcation area. And we know that soft tissue really adapts well to zirconia, and even more so to just polished zirconia. So there's nothing on the outer surface. There's no stains, there's no glaze, there's no roughness of any kind from that characterization process that can sometimes happen even from the lab. So you have a really smooth, polished surface, which we know zirconia is highly biocompatible. Let's take a look at the occlusal. And this is just with a light polish. I mentioned there is a Bruxer polishing kit that you can use. And there's really just that one polisher that I like using from that kit. There's a brown and blue polishing wheel. That brown polishing wheel does a nice job of getting a nice light polish on there.